on our agenda to have an opening prayer. So I've asked Pastor Blake if he would be so kind as to deliver that for us to set the tone for our meeting. Thank you, Pastor Blake.
The Lord be with you.
Also with you.
Let us pray. Dear loving God, we give you thanks for this community, for the gift that we have to serve you and live together as light and salt in this world that you love and that you have made. God, we thank you for the history of this congregation, for all that has been done here over the last 70 years. And as we look back at this last year and look ahead to what we might do with your help in 2023, bless us with your wisdom and your spirit. Guide us to be bold and courageous in sharing our gifts and unite us as your people. We pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you. Thank you, Pastor Blake. So for those of you that may not know me, I'm Greg Lampe, and I've had the privilege and the honor to serve as the president of the council this past year. We've had a wonderful year of transitions, returning to the new normal after the pandemic, and I hope you've enjoyed that transition. I know it's been, it's been challenging, right? Honestly, but we've gotten through it together as a community, as a faith-based group. We've done really well, and I am so proud and humbled to be part of this. It's been a wonderful experience. If you have a chance and you haven't had a chance to see the annual report, I encourage you to pick one up or to look at it online. There's a lot of information in here, including reports from all the committees and the executive committee members as well, who have written about the year in the past. So please take a moment to do that. On a personal note, I want to just say thank you for your prayers. You may have noticed my name has been in that list of people, and I am very grateful. You've been lifting me up every week, and you give me hope. And I just want to say thank you. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Derek, who is our treasurer, and he's going to walk us through the budget. Today, the real intent is to brief you on what's coming this coming year, from the annual budget, last year's budget to this year's budget, and some of the ministries that we're engaged in that you'll be hearing more about throughout the year. So Derek, thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Does that work? Everyone can hear me fine? So we definitely appreciate your leadership, Greg, and all the things you've done for the church. Well, these last couple of years, plus the time you served before that as well. So thank you for that. And you can flip the slide forward if you can. Hope everyone can see the slide, but if you don't know me, I'm Derek Matzke, the treasurer. So now kind of going on to my 5th year as the treasurer almost now. So it's been good to be part of it, and really have learned a lot about how the church works that I wouldn't have otherwise known, right? It's just being a member of the congregation. So it's been great to work with everyone on the leadership team. And I know we've got some other big plans as a church coming up in the next couple of years. So look forward to helping with that as well. So first thing I just wanted to go over is just how 2022 ended up. And this information is also in the annual report in kind of more detail format, but this is kind of the 1-page summary of it, of how we look at it each month when we get together as a council. So 2022, the actual column on the left. So we finished the year pretty much right on the budget when at the bottom line. So just a small surplus of about $2,000. And we budgeted actually to have a deficit of about $60,000. And at least over the last few years as a church, we've always budgeted potentially to have a deficit. And that's because over many years, we've always had surpluses, probably about $155,000 worth of surpluses over the last 8 or 9 years. So, right, our goal would be to use the money that comes in that everyone's so generously given to support the community and what we do here. But we've always had some surpluses. So we continue to budget deficits and finding ways to use that money. But our committees are very conscious, and our congregation is very giving and always meeting their pledge commitment. So we did finish with a small surplus. And then if you look at 2021's actual results, right, we also had a positive result in 2021. So that's where we started from. A couple of the highlights. So for revenue and regular giving. So we were basically right on our regular giving number. So all the pledges and commitments that the congregation made pretty much came in right on that number, $809,000. And then total offerings, that includes like the loose offerings, what we do for Christmas and other things like that. Again, those are pretty much right in line with what the previous year had been. And then between the total offerings and total revenue, that's where we put the building usage income, right? When different members of the community are renting out our building. That was actually a little bit higher than 2021 as more people are back and using our building, and we're, and welcoming many community members in. So that was a little bit higher. So overall, the revenue, everything's up about 2% from 2021 to 2022, which is great. We thought it'd be up about 1 to 2%, and that's right where it was. So that's, we should all be very, proud and thankful for our community to be so supportive. And then that lets us, use that money in different ways. So all of our committees are pretty much actual results are below the budget, which is typically where it comes out or right in line. When we come down to, salaries and ministry support, that's our largest expense, right? Our staff and what we do here at the church. So that was less than what we had budgeted for. And that's because we went most of the year without the choir director role and the children's choir director roles that were unfilled. So we had budgeted those positions, but really didn't fill those. And some of the other music related, just maybe less presence of music in church throughout the year in 2021 and into 2022. So that's really the main reason why the actual expenses are less than the budget. We have continued to budget for those positions in 2023. We want to fill those positions. Everyone in church is really working hard to find the right fit for those positions. So we will keep that going. Just also at a high level, it's not on here, but our cash balance in the bank is $272,000. And that's really those surpluses that have added up over the last 8-9 years, $155,000 of surpluses that have kind of built up in there. So we do have a nice cash balance as well. So does anybody have any questions just about how 2022 ended up? Okay. You can flip to the next slide. So as we look ahead to 2023, obviously step one is the stewardship campaign and all the great work that we do to renew our pledges for the next year. So the pledging number this year was, I think, the highest dollar amounts that we've ever seen, at least in my time here. And Pastor Blake was also think that maybe the higher dollar amount we've seen. So $738,000 in pledges, which is really a fantastic number. If you just look back at the last 3 years, all around 690. So now to jump up to 738 is great. Almost $50,000 higher in pledges this coming up year compared to last year. Just for a little bit of context, there's 275 pledging units or family units or individuals that pledge. So it's about $2,680 would be the average pledge. There was 108 pledge units, family units that increased their giving this year. So almost, 108 increased, 28 new pledges. And then there's kind of an offsetting 30, 35, which also maybe stopped or didn't pledge or didn't send in a pledge card. But really it's those increases, the 108 pledges that increase about $50,000, which kind of makes the difference there. We are working hard, right, to get people who maybe haven't pledged. That's part of our giving, but getting them to send in a pledge card. So some of that might just be people who have always given to the church without a formal pledge, now formalizing it. But in any sense, we should be very confident going forward that our congregation is supporting what we're doing here as a church. So it'll be a very successful campaign there. So this has to do with the mortgage. So the building mortgage is important because we are getting pretty low actually on our mortgage balance, which is great. We've been working very hard as a congregation to pay that off. So we're down to $200,000 left on the mortgage. And in the stewardship campaign, we have $100,000 worth of pledges for the building fund as well. That number on the previous slide was just the operating fund. So we also have $100,000. So that will cover all of the principal payments and interest payments that we need for 2023. So that's been great that we still have people in the congregation who are committing specifically to cover the mortgage on the building. And we have $64,000 built up in our building fund cash balance. That's where we save 6 months worth of payments, basically as a reserve. So when we get to the end, obviously we want to use that as our last 6 months worth of payments. So if you take the 100,000 that's pledged plus 64 in the bank, that's only 36,000 more. So we should be out of this mortgage probably early in 2024. If everything continues the way it's going, somewhere on the middle of 2024. Lines up very well with if we're going to be expanding and doing other projects here. We should know that our mortgage will be resolved basically on what we have today, then be in a good position to, do whatever financing we might need to do on a new, any new renovations moving forward. So that's really a nice thing for us to potentially not have that mortgage going forward. We've never had to draw from the operating budget of the church. It's always been specifically covered by people pledging to the building fund, which has been fantastic. So, quick look ahead to 2023's budget. Again, the details can also be found in the annual report. So with that $738,000 pledge number, we always budget for somewhere between 80 and 100,000 of just unbudgeted, unpledged giving that the congregation does. So we have 825,000 right now budgeted for regular giving. Really, we think about it as this number, 869. So that's about a 2% increase from where 2022's actual results came. I'm pretty confident in that number, just given the increases and the new pledges that we saw. But that's I think a number we were all comfortable with as a congregational council. And then all the committees, put in their budgets. Again, they're budgeted 2023, pretty consistent with 2022's budget. As I said, oftentimes our committees spend less than what they've planned, but like we've increased our budget for social ministry and the support we do for the community organizations that we work with. And then when you kind of come down, so when it gets to salaries and ministries, again, that's our largest individual, line item. We've budgeted for about a 5% increase in compensation to our church staff, which, is doing a fantastic job. And all the evaluations and end of the year feedback from the pastors and from the staff that our personnel committee gets is that everyone is having a really great experience working at Midvale, and we want to keep that staff together and as best we can. And so overall, think about 4% of an increase in our 2023 budgeted expenses compared to 2022's budgeted expenses. So this budgeted deficit is getting high, right? That's 76,000. We tried to budget 60 last year and still broke even. So now we have about a $76,000 deficit. But I think we should be confident in that because of the surpluses that we have built up over the last 9 years, right? Our goal should be to use that money and support our community. And remember, that was 155,000 that we've built up over the last few years. So even if we did hit that number, we would still really have extra money still from what we've built up over the past few years. And we have, right, a cash balance that's over $250,000 as well. So we shouldn't be concerned about that number, but that is kind of where the budget numbers came out. Not sure if anyone has any questions about 2023 budget numbers, but that's what our congregational council was comfortable with. Yeah, go ahead.
You could tell me to save this for later or whatever. I was impressed with the pledges because I would think that some people might think, well, we're going to have a building campaign and I'm not going to increase my pledge because the building campaign is going to hope that we pledge some things for that. And so it might hold steady. So I thought that was a really great sign, actually. Am I delusional?
I guess only every individual person can answer that question if they change their pledge approach or not, but it's great to see we have to just think of that as supporting the year, day-to-day, month-to-month, year, ministries of our church. And that's one thing. And then raising money for the building is going to be a separate conversation. I know each person will have to decide how that works for them and their family, but yes, definitely a really positive sign that I think everyone's supporting what the congregation is doing. Yeah. Right.
So Derek,
Yes.
in the annual report, on page 8, I just need a clarification. Under assets, there is building improvement dash Findorf. What does that mean?
So over the years, I think a long time ago, when some of the renovation was originally done on this half of the church, some of those expenses got tracked as actually being building expenses as opposed to just running them through and paying for them as we go. That doesn't have anything to do with our cash balance. We could keep track of exactly how much we pay for the building and then like depreciate it over time as we go along. Like if you were following like a public company accounting, but for a church, that's not really that relevant how much was spent on the church because we've already spent that money. It's in the past. We only focus on what our operating budgets are and what our building budget will be on a year-to-year basis. So I wouldn't pay much attention to that number. It doesn't reflect the value of our building or the fair value of our building or how much money we even put into the building. At one point way in the past, someone decided we should put some value of the building on the books, but it doesn't mean anything from our day-to-day budgets. It's simply an accounting item.
So just as somebody in the archives, okay?
Sure.
Do you think that should have an asterisk and some little definition at the bottom somewhere? That's the one thing that hung me up.
Sure.
I didn't know what.
We talked about that we could just eliminate that we could make an entry in our books that would just write that all off down to 0. That would also make sense to like Pastor Blake and I have talked about this as well. But then someone would ask why it went from 1.8 down to 0 this year. So that if I were to start fresh with the church's books, I would not have that on there, but it has always been on there. So I didn't feel like I had any reason to change it. I think the plan is when we do the building renovation, or if we do a building renovation, we are going to have a lot more expenses, right, for the building that we're going to pay.
Right.
At that point, I think we should decide if we're always going to keep track of everything we spend on the building or never. And then it's either going to be 0 moving forward, or we're going to start putting it all on there.
Well, I don't know why in the interim, one couldn't just have a little footnote
Sure.
to that item. And then regardless of the way we go, at least people would know.
Yes.
Thank you.
We certainly can.
Thank you.
Of course. Pastor Blake and I are laughing that you asked that question because we had been talking about that for 2 years. So. Good question. Endowment fund?
Just
Oh, yeah. I'll
a
start. Go ahead.
quick question.
Of course.
So it's sort of related to that, but as near as I can tell, for example, the Wakefield House is not listed as an asset in our books. And I don't know, maybe that's something that could be considered too, is whether that should be rationalized.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, we have the way that the accounting of things have been historically, right? We have not put that on our books as like our asset. That's tracked as, expenses come from here. We support we support that house through our operating budget, but we don't have anything on like our balance sheet that says like we own this house for X dollar amounts or what its fair value would be worth if we had to, borrow against it. The way the nonprofit accounting kind of works, each has its own little fund, each has its own little, silo. And the operating fund is the one that we focus on the most. But you're right, there's lots of other giving that we do as a congregation, to support hunger and all the different give that does not show up on what I'm showing here and just our regular giving, right? We do a lot of other things that people give money for to support other causes that tell a little bit more of the stories told in the annual report. But here we're really just looking at that operating budget. So the endowment fund, obviously we are very, blessed to have a really nice endowment fund that supports activities of the church. So it wasn't a great year for the endowment fund financially, and just given the markets, that's about a 12% decrease, but that's pretty consistent, I think, with what happened to in the market across or anyone's 401ks or retirement funds, pretty similar. So, we're not invested in anything that's more aggressive or different than just the general market there. So we still had $53,000 of investment income that comes from the endowment fund. And the amount that comes from the endowment fund is based on kind of our balance over the last 5 years. It's an average amount that we get back. So we're actually going to see a pretty consistent number available for grants each year. We're not going to be swinging up and down with the market on what we have available for our endowment grants. So just so you know that number won't swing up or down by 12 or 15% year to year, which should be pretty flat based on 5 years. And then there's always a little bit of previous year's grants that don't get spent in full, or we don't spend all of it. So we had 59,463, which is available for grants this year. Okay, and Susan, who leads our endowment committee, she can give a little bit of perspective on the grants.
Good morning. The Endowment Committee is supporting 7 grants that came in this year. And as Derek said, the number that we have available to support our grants is 59,463. The first grant is the Adult Bible School. This is the program that goes through the summer, and the request was for $1,500, and the committee has supported that, the entire grant. The second grant is Midvale's 70th anniversary, which is a time for us to celebrate our history and to look back and look ahead. And interestingly enough, that is one of the things when the Endowment Committee original guidelines were written, it was to support celebrations. And so the amount requested is $8,000, and the committee supports that. Lent meals. This is to subsidize the meals that are going to be done throughout. And I know both Pastor Katie and Pastor Blake have talked about the fact that there is going to be meals both during the day, lunch, it's called lunch, lunch, and then also dinner. And the request for that was $5,800, and the committee supports full funding. The refurnish and repair the organ. There are a few things on the organ that still need some work. Some of the wooden portions of the organ, and also I believe the chimes. And the request for that was $8,000, and the committee supports that. The sanctuary projection screen, and I believe there's going to be a little bit more information about that, Randy. Okay, so I'll let them talk about that because they know far more about that than I do. The grant request was for $30,000. The committee recommends that we fund at $15,000. If we supported the whole $30,000, we would have to severely reduce what we were going to do with other grants, or maybe not even fund some grants. And I think you're going to talk about the total price too, Randy. Thank you. Mindful Pause. Mindful Pause is a workshop that is going to be offered to the members of Midvale and also community members, kind of how to deal with life when it gets difficult. And the request was for $1,400, and we would like to fund it at that amount. And then the last one is the asylum seekers sponsorship. This is to provide the basic needs, the community integration, and secondary support for the asylum process. This is a second year for this grant. It was written last year for $36,000, and last year we funded it at $18,000. This year we recommend funding it at $18,000 as well. So then our total proposed endowment grants for 2023 is $57,700. So any questions? All right, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. And at next week's annual meeting, you'll have an opportunity to really approve those grants. But this is just a preview of what's coming. So in our next section of this meeting, we'd like to just highlight some of our ministries, some of the things that are coming down the pike, and also highlight some successes like the solar awning project that And we have guest speakers to take care of all that. So we're going to start with the sanctuary projection screens. And Randy, there you are. Randy's going to talk a little bit about this. He's the chair of the worship committee, and they've been working on this project. So
good morning. Can you go to the first slide? Okay, pre-pandemic, like the education wing remodeling group, we were looking at projection screens. We had to put it on hold with the pandemic, and we're bringing that back up again and looking to proceed. What are the expected outcomes from doing this? First, it's to enhance the worship experience. Second, it's to add capabilities for a variety of other programs and events that use the sanctuary space. So that's the rationale. That's the expected outcome from what's being proposed. The second thing is what are we looking to do? Next slide. 2 retractable screens on either side of the sanctuary. You can see one of them is closer on the right-hand side of the picture. What's shown there is a 6x10 retractable screen. We've looked at different sizes, 5x9, 6x10, haven't decided what might work, but it would be on either side of the altar area in a way that would not impact the altar itself. It would be on either side. They are retractable, so they would be down when they're used, and when they're not used, they would be up. So you wouldn't have that constantly hanging in that place when it's not being used. 2 other monitors, one for musicians and choir, and then also a confidence monitor at the back of the sanctuary for worship leaders. It's also integrated into the current sound system and cameras. We're looking at the same company that has been working with us on our sound system and recently helped us get back up and running after our Christmas Eve water issues. So it would definitely make sense to integrate with the cameras that we currently have in the sanctuary. Next slide. So how would we use this? We have a list: annual meetings, vacation Bible school, adult forums, ELCA synod events, guest speakers. Dr. Rob, when he spoke, used the altar area, but it was just with an old-fashioned screen with a projector. This would enable more of those kinds of presentations. How might we use it for worship? The thought here is that we will experiment and try things and see what makes sense, see what works. This isn't intended to just be the list of the order of the service or the words to the songs. It can be much more than that and much more impactful if there are videos or pictures or things of that sort. I don't know how many of you have been to, for example, a wedding or a funeral where they've shown pictures of the bride and the groom before the service or after the service. That's the kind of thing potentially we could do. I will say in December, my wife and I attended a concert, a handbell concert at Asbury United Methodist Church in Middleton, and they have screens on either side of the altar like what we're proposing. And they had pictures and bio information on the choir members doing a loop on a slide presentation, which was a very effective use of it. So this opens up a lot of possibilities for us, not just in worship, but in a variety of other activities. So that's what we're looking at. Next slide. You'll be seeing more information on this. Like I said, we are starting to re-engage in this project, which we put on hold during the pandemic. We need authorization of the council and the congregation to get the approvals. So you'll have more information, more opportunity to ask questions before it's actually approved. The fact that the grant request has been approved and that the congregation may approve it doesn't mean the project will automatically happen. We still need to approve the project. This is considered seed money for the total cost of about $60,000. The request was for half of it. The $15,000 is about a quarter of it. And we envision a variety of funding sources similar to other projects that we've done where We've used donations, we've used memorials and special gifts and things like that. So that's it.
Thank you, Randy. Any questions for Randy on the projection project? Oh, Randy, you have a question.
As a family in the kind of the often sitting in the kids section, sometimes real close to the sacristy, visibility of a screen from like real close to where the screens are could be difficult. I'm wondering if there's been any exploration of like cantilevering them out a little bit or angling them out a bit for kind of view across the sanctuary.
That's certainly something we'll be able to look at, as to how they are hung for visibility. I know the company looked at that and picked the spots with us in terms of where we would do it, but certainly that's something we can look at.
Another question back there.
You don't have to answer this now, but as I listen to this, I think about some of our shut-ins who literally aren't showing up in our building to attend, but there's more and more ways that they could experience worship with our Facebook time or our screens or things like that. Do we ever reach out to our shut-ins and say, do you know how you could do this? Because maybe part of being a shut-in is that they never hear about this. They're not here today. And if we reached out, and do we count the people who tune in for Facebook? Do we count that as attendance?
Yes.
It is great, because I think we've got so much good going on. We want to keep sharing this good programming and this good preaching and all of this. And it's not for us. It's for the message. So I just think we want to keep reminding ourselves we can keep making people aware of all the ways when they say, oh, I'm not going to be able to come to church this Sunday. Well, tune in, watch from home. I'm so impressed when the pastors can look at the camera and look at the congregation and remember all those kinds of things and preach a great message and do great time with the children. We just need to keep sharing.
Any other questions?
Yeah, thank you.
I'm not sure this relates to the screen, but it relates to Eric's question. Last Thursday, I had a homebound Holy Communion visit with a friend of Chris Hill's, who she, as an evangelist, is seeking to bring into our congregation through membership. And before I left, I talked with Chris and this woman and her husband to set up how to worship on Facebook, so she can have baby steps to get into our congregation until she's able to have a ride with Chris to a 5 o'clock service. And so I think we are doing that. And I want to lift up Chris Hill as an evangelist too.
Okay, I think we're ready to move on. Thank you very much for those questions and those comments. Next up is Ben Kempinen, and he's, as you know, the chair of our social ministry committee. And he'd like to provide an update about one of our assets, as came up earlier, about the Wakefield House. So Ben, it's all yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg, and good morning, everybody. The Wakefield House, which is pictured here in a nicer time of year, just a little background, which I expect most of you know. In 1994, the church purchased this residence, which is right next to the church, for $110,000. There was some question about its value as an asset. Because of its status, we don't get yearly city assessments, but if one puts any credibility in some of the online estimates, it's worth somewhere between $300,000 and $325,000 right now. We have used it a number of ways. For the last roughly 10 years, we partner with the Madison Community Foundation and the Road Home to provide 2 years of housing for needy families. Our most recent guest moved out last week, and basically where we are right now is in a position of there are some long-term needs that the property has for repairs. I won't burden you with the details. If anybody wants to see the reports that we've commissioned in the past, please let me know and I'll send them to you. But we're looking at repairs, infrastructure, if you will, for a home built in 1955 that probably are in the $20,000-$25,000 range. We thought it made sense to not start on those while the building was occupied. And so the hope is that we'll be getting bids and have a better idea of the needs at that time. Moving forward, after the house is restored to better condition, then the issue comes up that we've confronted every 2 years, and that is, what do we do with the property? I've been a member since the early 90s, but apparently before that time, there was an interesting community reaction, neighborhood reaction to turning it into a parking lot. And so that's one of the options, I think, probably off the table. Although with some of the recent excitement, perhaps that becomes a more attractive option again, a story for another day. And one of the other options is to sell the property. And of course, the congregation decides. The benefit of that is to take advantage of the increased value. The downside is obviously it's an asset that we wouldn't have future use of. We have sort of, the certainly Social Ministry Committee, and I believe the council, has kind of decided that the best use of the property moving forward is to provide help for housing needs in Dane County. I would say that we have invested between $25,000 and $30,000 in the home to make it more livable from 2018 until the present. And so that investment, I think, in our view, has sort of tilted things towards continuing its use in that way. And again, reports on all the improvements that we've had and that I can share with anybody who'd want them. One issue has arisen that I just touch upon quickly about how have we funded some of this. And basically, during the time that we have had guests with the Road Home, the Building Futures program, as it's now called, we've basically gone to the congregation and, independent of pledges or other drives, have raised between $16,000 and $18,000 to basically pay for utilities and other expenses with the property. There's also a line item of, I think, $7,800 in the building and grounds budget. And we have used those funds to both pay for utilities and the type of wear and tear and repairs that all homes have. We've also had extraordinarily generous donations from members, replacing the windows, the furnace, the air conditioning. An anonymous member of the church paid to have the house painted in 2020. And we've also had an energy grant from MG&E. We've used the Capital Improvements Fund, and then also some funds from an insurance settlement when we had hail damage on the church. So we've tried to be creative and looked at different resources. And where we're at right now is having our most recent guest left, sort of assess the condition of the property and move forward to get it ready. And then as a congregation, decide how we can best serve the church's mission and ministry by using the resource again. And I guess I'd also take a moment to sort of say on behalf of social ministry for this project and other ones, thank you all from the bottom of our hearts for the kind of assistance you've given, because we would not be able to do the things we do and be the presence we've been in the community without your support. And in the last couple of years with COVID, our ability to sort of serve with in-person activities has been somewhat diminished, which has made that much more important, the financial contributions. Little by little, we're getting back out in the community. We've done some work with social ministry. I'd mentioned with providing meals for the Lutheran Campus Ministry. And for those of you that like cooking casseroles, March 27th, we're going to have a hoedown at the Triangle Ministry, providing dinner there. And so there's other activities to come. So any questions about Wakefield or social ministry? Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben. So as you know, we have a big project coming up potentially, and we're going to hear about that, about the now called the ministry wing renovation, which was formerly our education wing, but this is much, I think, a great title for our wing. So thank you in advance for doing this. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. My name is Eric Herkert Oakland. My wife is on staff, children and family assistant. And so most of my time, well, just kind of my quick on the background is that my wife and I started, we started attending Midvale before we had kids, but it was when our kids were born that we really started getting involved in the church. We'd both been in ministry before, we took a break, but we have a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old. And if you see, my 10-year-old's often usurping other kids' acolyting duties. I think he likes the bread. But just to say that this is the education wing upstairs is where I spend most of my time when I'm here at church. But one of the things that we're here for is this ministry wing. And I think I'm hearing a kind of a pattern of people want to come back to Midvale. How do we make this space more focused on the people and the ministries that we do here? And so this is just in line with that. The education ministry wing task force came together as a result in 2016 of questions to the congregation of what's important to us, what matters to us. And out of that came a pretty big effort to say, well, what are the spaces and how do they change and what do we need to do with them? And so as of 2019, we got ready to I wasn't a part of this group, but the task force got ready to present at the annual meeting and to the congregation. And then we had the pandemic and we put it on hold. Familiar story. So it was already, but in the meantime, we didn't, I don't think the congregation this is not a congregation to sit on their laurels. So people did what they could do. And so there was some work done on energy efficient windows in the wing and some other places. There's some work on the solar awnings. There was work on remediation in the basement and making sure we didn't have the flooding and more insulation. So work was done that was a part of that kind of bigger sweeping renovation. And so coming back now to 2023, we're completing some of those projects. And similarly, it was asked, okay, what happened with this? Where are we at? And so for the past couple months, the task force has simply gone through what had existed, the communications, the things that were on the plans, and looked at it and say, well, what should we move forward with now? So you can go ahead and move to the next slide. Looking back at what the needs of the congregations that were identified for this space was, there's obviously some existing building maintenance, things that needed to be updated. One of those being HVAC in the space, just making it a more pleasant space to be in different temperatures, but maximizing the building space, creating more comfort areas, especially as our social ministry, we're trying to create this welcoming space for people that identify in different genders and relationships, et cetera, that we need to create spaces that signal that as well. Looking at more sustainable design and improvements, and then the aesthetics of the space. After kind of starting to talk about this with people, one of the things that I've heard often is, look at our worship space, the place we're most proud of, the place we're spend most of our time, and then you come down to the basement and it feels like a different place. It feels like a different space for us, and we want to kind of bring that continuity into it. So I'm going to try and run over what some of these changes are as quickly as I can, because we don't have a ton of time, but we're open for questions. So on the first floor, these are the offices. Currently, the offices come to about here, and there's a meeting room here, and we're looking to expand into that meeting room to create more, change the office space to serve our full-time staff, but most notably kind of this flexible work area. And you're going to hear this term flexible a lot in this, and that trying to create these spaces on all these levels to be as flexible as they can be for different ministries. So this work area that people can come in, set up the space. They might be volunteers, they might be working on short-term projects, et cetera, et cetera. And we've got a number of additional kind of collaboration and conference rooms that the staff can use and other people can use to work in here. Also notable is the adding of kind of a reception area that would provide kind of a entry and a welcoming space, monitoring of the space for safety, making sure you see people as they come in and out and can greet them. But also, and this right here is kind of a ceiling feature rather than a desk. So what that will look like. The other thing I'll note, these are top-down schematics. It is hard for our brains to totally get what that three-dimensionally will look like. So that will be part of the process moving forward of is exploring what that looks like for everybody. But then also, just some different spaces, an additional bathroom on this floor that will be a single use, non-gendered. Also on this floor is we've got this wall here that when you walk into the main entrance, that wall to the left that goes all the way up, we're looking at opening that up and making the visibility of the stairways so that navigation of the space becomes more intuitive for people that are visiting. I'll just ask for any questions on this page real quick before I move on to the next one. Or if there's anybody on the task force that wants me to comment on something that I've missed. All right. Second floor. This is where the children's education happens on Sunday morning, but there's a lot of things that could be happening here throughout the week. The major changes here, if you go up there, we've got kind of accordion wall divisions that are hard to use. They're hard to latch. They're a style that was available. We've got new solutions that we're looking at that are very streamlined. They take up less space. They're often glass partitions in some cases, so allow some see-through, some transparency, which is for safety and for being able to see who's where. There is a room right here that would be taken out. So there's a meeting space right here, circle of chairs, coffee. There's some books up there if you've been up there. In order to create a larger open check-in area for families, this wall here also is one of those movable partitions. So this could become a larger kind of gathering space for activities for Sunday school or for other things. There are two bathrooms that are right here currently. We're going to have two non-gendered bathrooms here and two non-gendered bathrooms here. And then there's a little widening of this hallway as well for kind of ease of these dots are exposed pillars that will be there. But overall, a lot of the rooms are in the same place, but just with different partitions to kind of be able to open that up and change how we use those. Any questions on this space? All right, and then we go to the basement. And there's a couple of parts here. Here is the youth and family, the high school youth space. Right now there's a wall here. And so we would kind of move to a flexible partition here again to open up that space. There's a fireplace there currently that we would remove. It's not one that gets use. And then we've got the biggest, we've got meeting spaces that do have windows, but these are probably some of the least used spaces in our building, and we would want to bring them up to the standard of our main level meeting room space that has new finishes. It has the smart board or the whiteboard projector, that sort of thing, and make those equally as accessible, equally as usable, so that there's just more choice, more flexibility for using these spaces. There's storage for AWE and some of our ministries, and we're looking at making sure there's enough storage there. There are some other options to transform some spaces into some storage. And then in addition to that, we've got the plans had 4 non-gendered single-use bathrooms. One of these currently contains the women's bathroom, I believe, contains a shower. And there has been a response of let's make sure we incorporate that and keep that. So we're looking at what that would look like, maintaining the shower as one of the features of this. Any questions here? I guess I'll also note that there'll be some work on the roof, redoing the flat portions of the roof that go over the greeting area and the ministry wing. For preparation, and then the placement of solar panels. And part of that will be insulating properly to maintain that kind of be able to better maintain the internal ecosystem. with those changes.
I guess I just want to say they've done two other presentations, an adult forum and another one, and those are on YouTube. So if you want to see more details on this, there's
Yep.
lengthier
details.
presentations on YouTube.
Other questions or comments? Thank you. Thank you very much for that. And thanks to the task force for rejuvenating our efforts in 2019 and 20. That was really heartening to see. And obviously Gene's ready to talk about the solar awning project, so I want to get out of his way. So go ahead, Gene. Thank
Well,
you.
thank you. I'm Gene Nelson. I'm one of the members of the Solar Task Force. And it's kind of a subcommittee of the Care for Creation Task Force led by Karen Richardson. If you'd stand up or wave a little bit. I want to thank her for her leadership. I think back in 2021, we started looking at putting solar panels on our building and where do we put them? And so we were looking at the condition of the roof, and yeah, that roof's not going to last forever and will probably need to be replaced in the next 10 years. So we decided, what else could we do? And we also were looking to do something that was more visible, that people, when they saw it, says, yes, we're trying to be more sustainable. So we came up with this idea of solar awnings. And so we entered into a contract in early 2022. And we originally had hopes of having it running by the end of summer of 2022. But guess what? These supports here were part of the supply chain issue, and we did not get those until mid-December. So they did do some work in October. And so we finally got these panels installed in January. And on January 24th, MG came here and gave it its blessing and says, yes, you can start using it. And so since January 24th, we've been generating a portion of our own electricity. So this is a picture with Jay. This is Burke O'Neill. He's the contractor. And of course, myself and Karen. So it wasn't, even though it was a winter day, we're generating electricity. And boy, its performance of the system has actually exceeded our expectations. So this link up here is a public link. Anybody can log into it. And I'll put this in the moments too. So don't worry about copying this down. But I will get that in there. But you will get the screen like this. And what you'll see is the current power. And it'll vary during the day, and it'll peak up here, and it tells you how many kilowatt hours we're doing for that day. And there's also some other interesting tabs on here. When you go to this website, you can click on see what the history was for 3 days or for the month or for the year, how much actually energy we were producing. Also puts a dollar value and how much carbon we're saving. So it's very, this was an interesting picture that Karen took during the installation. We got the cross in there, and I thought that was very appropriate. So yeah, some of the units are in metric, so I have to do some conversion. Next slide. So I think that's it for my part. Anybody have any questions? We'll look forward to giving you some future reports on how the system's working.
That screenshot was taken on Friday, so it's a relatively fresh look.
It was probably early morning.
Yeah, it was. But it's really nice to be able to go in there. I've been, since Gene sent me the link, I've been going in just to see. It's really fun to see the tracking of the power, and we should be, I think, really pleased that we were able to do this. I know that was one of the visions of the 2019 task force as a separate project to look at solar. And so this has been really a wonderful development, and glad again to see us following through on some of our own visions and serving our climate and our world, right, in trying to lessen our carbon footprint. So I know we're almost out of time. I just want to say a couple more things. One is I want to encourage you to come to the annual meeting next week. It will be immediately following the church service, the 10:30 service. We will be serving some food, and there'll be some hospitality. And we'll be running through not only what you've seen today in terms of the budget, past and present and future, but we'll also be electing our officers and recognizing the officers in the congregation that are leaving their positions. So I would really encourage you to come. The other part, and I hope, Emily, if you don't mind me saying this, I think next week we're going to celebrate our pastor's 25th anniversary since their ordination, which the Congregational Council really put as a priority because it's so important to celebrate those moments, right? And to express our appreciation and support. So between services, there will be cake and there'll be celebration in that way. And then the adult forum will give the pastors a chance, both Pastor Katie and Pastor Blake, a chance to reflect on their ministry and talk about their lives basically as pastors. So I want to invite you to that. And to engage in our hospitality hour to, again, celebrate their accomplishment. Emily, did you want to add anything? All right, well, thank you again. Hope to see you next week at our annual meeting. Thanks so much. Thank you, presenters.